Hello everybody, welcome back to Level 1 News. Today is January 17th. We might be snowed under, we don't know yet. But today we're doing government and security news.
I don't think there's much risk of snowed under from this one, is there? There's like 4 inches.
Yeah, but there's going to be ice mixed into it. So that's not great.
There's a guy that pumps his basement into our street and because, water. And it makes it insanely dangerous because the water is liquid when it comes out of his basement and water and frozen when it enters the street. So everybody's like, where?
Just sliding down the hill.
Good thing that's not a busy street.
Yeah.
It is. Well, let's talk about the FTC. Now, the FTC is now headed by the lovely and talented Lena Khan. Is that right? Is she the other one? Yeah, okay. And she, of course, is on the record of hating big tech, especially Facebook. What's not to hate about Facebook, right?
Not hating big tech, just their abuses.
What else is there from big tech? But she was getting a little bit of pushback on this latest one. Now, this is a baby step, but hey, it's a step, right?
The FTC's antitrust suit against Facebook is cleared to move forward. A federal judge has said, yeah, this is pretty good. They've already presented more robust and detailed evidence. You might recall an earlier suit that was kind of dismissed. It was the state attorneys general that were, I was like, well, you haven't established that Facebook is dominant. And it's like, okay, we're going to bring the rain.
Now, the judge also said that they did face a, quote, tall task, which Google and Facebook and everybody latched onto and said, hey, tall task, yeah, tall task. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And it may very well not. They argue that, quote, our investments in Instagram and WhatsApp transform them into what they are today. Wow. Tracking software.
Our investments into the judge will ensure that nothing gets punished.
Speaking of tracking and software, we are still working on the Devember stuff. There's so many good Devember things. And also, it went so well that Linode has agreed to sponsor the news for the entire calendar year of 2022. So, yeah, be sure to use that Linode affiliate link. There's no current contest, but you can still get $100 of free Linode credits.
I went and did almost all the Minecraft B-roll, and I have my winners picked out, but I need to do the A-roll.
Yay! Yes, we got to get those videos out next week or the week after.
But we're going to be snowed under.
Well, that's a great time to work on those kind of things.
If we have power.
Yeah, if we have, that is the big question with this particular storm.
Well, the FAA has also been having a bit of a spat with some of the companies, particularly the mobile carriers, and it's all about the 5G. They've been batting it back and forth. Last week, they were like, no, we're not playing ball. We're not doing it. Apparently, some minds were changed.
The FAA reveals the 50 U.S. airports with 5G buffer zones. Verizon and AT&T have agreed not to deploy C-band networks around these airports at the FAA's request. So apparently they found something. Because remember, the tech bros from Verizon and AT&T last week were saying, nah, we checked. It's nothing. But if you have something legit, let us know. And so in this one, AT&T and Verizon are saying, all right, these 50 airports have, the trash level technology. I guess we'll wait a bit.
If there is something to it, it makes you wonder why they're only doing 50.
Well, it's the big ones. I think I saw another article. I didn't read it, but the headline makes me think that a lot of this has to do with the fact that a lot of the helicopters are still older.
Yeah.
It's the planes, not so much, but you got some old birds whirling around up there, and their instrumentation is never going to get upgraded.
The guy from Magnum PI needs to go ahead and retire.
What about things like hospitals then? Because they use a lot of air transport that's like helicopters.
That's a good point.
Drones are taking those jobs.
But I imagine
can't transport a person on a drone.
I imagine an organ transplant helicopter is probably not an old Huey from Vietnam.
Yeah.
You can just about buy those as surplus.
Once we cycle all those out, we'll be fine. And this is another follow-up. We talked about this a while back. Massachusetts, for whatever reason, in New England, they're all about right to repair. And God bless them for it. But in Massachusetts, the time has come. They must now reap the rewards of their right to repair law, unless
Carmakers launch a desperate attempt to delay the Massachusetts right to repair law. They want to push it from 2022 to 2025. They are spending a lot of money on this campaign to try to get a delay.
And I like that their Congress critter who heard about this was like, yeah, whatever, the people have already spoken. He basically just told them to go screw themselves.
I really hope that this works out this way, but when this kind of money is involved, things have a way of getting slowed down.
Yeah. And this is all about the telemetry, which is now going wireless, and there are special devices from the manufacturer that you need to do that. This law says you must have access to those. They cannot lock that from you.
The other thing that the auto manufacturers are fighting back against is you can do things now, like if Joe Bob changes your oil, it would void your whole vehicle warranty, regardless of whether Joe Bob changed your oil correctly. And the telemetry from these vehicles report that. That's the other thing in the right to repair is like, hey, if they do the repair correctly, you can't void the warranty.
You can see why they're fighting it. What monsters? And another couple of monsters who were themselves hunting monsters. But the problem is with the wrong kind of monsters.
Pocket monsters.
LAPD officers fired for catching a Snorlax instead of a burglar. Denied appeal.
You know what? The Verge.
This is a great image.
I don't think there's any proof it was a Snorlax.
I think that they were listening. Like the guy was wondering why they didn't go to the burglar, their boss, and he listened in on the car conversation, and they did say Snorlax.
Oh, okay.
They were literally looking for a Snorlax instead of going to back up a burglary investigation.
But what's funny about this is the appeal.
Yeah, and in fact, it was probably not just Snorlax, because there was 20 minutes of Pokemon Go conversation in this police cruiser. It's all they talked about for 20 minutes.
I mean, it'd be fine if there was nothing else going on, but you just got called for backup.
Yeah, and so like you say, this is the appeal and the grounds of the appeal, which I love it when cops get caught doing things and they use excuses that they themselves would never accept as cops.
Yeah.
The excuse they use was, that was a private conversation. You shouldn't be able to use it against me. Even though it was in a public police cruiser while I was on duty.
It's like, this server's down. It's like, yeah, but I really need to get back to Icarus so I can mine some platinum. I really need
We
that
haven't
platinum
played Icarus
pickaxe.
all week.
God help us if you would have gotten the Pokemon Go bug.
Oh, man. There was a gym across the street from our office, so that was like a big deal for a while.
Yeah. I managed to avoid that somehow.
You would have been banned for geohacking the first week. I know you. I know what you would have done. Right to repair is one big argument that we have to look at, but also the arguments for open source software. Now, we can look across the pond at Germany when they did this. When open source gained some footholds in Germany, boy, Microsoft hit hard against it and succeeded for a while. So the same kind of thing is being rolled out here. There's clearly pockets being lined because these arguments are dumb.
Lots of recycled arguments when legislature debates open source software. This is the Concord Monitor. So this is, we actually had a couple of articles about open source software in government. Where does it make sense? And this has to do with websites. Like, should the websites use open source JavaScript libraries, or should the taxpayers pay for proprietary libraries? And a lot of the pro open source arguments here are basically, look, the open source stuff is to a state of the art where we shouldn't need anything that's not open source. And that's kind of like saying we shouldn't need to buy anything proprietary because the open standards for making basic stuff are there. So we shouldn't pay extra software licensing fees on top of that because we know the universe of things that are free will cover our needs.
And of course, the government playbook is never let a crisis go to waste. Always keep that phrase in your mind when you are listening to the government, because they trotted out good old Log4j.
Yeah.
Look what happens when you put open source software everywhere.
Yeah.
What about that Microsoft Exchange hack?
Oh, yeah.
Which one was the higher magnitude?
What about the SMB-v1 hack for file shares, where it was just like, let's allow file shares on the network? There's a part of it, like, even affected Linux, because the protocol said, oh, if you see this in the packet, just go ahead and run the binary that's in the packet. And the Linux people were like, okay, sounds good. And then later it was like, wait, why is this here?
Also, isn't the government struggling to find people who can like work on their outdated systems? And it's like, wouldn't it make more sense to use something a lot of people use?
Yeah.
Although we do have another article that is it's a cautionary tale about using packages. But I mean, these days, you can't do without them, and yet they're so untrustworthy. It's a horrible situation. Your package manager is a terrifying place. It's not as bad as the App Store, but it's getting there. And what kind of world is that? And what kind of world is this? It's actually a little bit heartening. I wonder what the loophole will be.
I was thinking that as I read this.
Because there's going to be one, because that's a lot of really valuable data, and they're not going to give it up.
No. EU orders Europol to delete data on citizens who have not committed crimes. So it came to the EU High Court's attention that all of these agencies have been hoovering up a lot of data for a really long time. And so the order here was, well, unless it's part of an investigation for criminal activity, you need to delete it, which is the vast majority of that data. It's not going to be deleted.
Are they going to just find crimes like this person jaywalked on January 22nd, 2021? So
Yeah.
You start getting citations in the mail. What? Got to keep you on a list.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have this, like, when you start doing things they don't like, they have to be able to consult the database so they can find something you're guilty of, like lying on a home loan application or something like that.
But it's important to point out, the legal system exists in such a state right now that all of us, every day, are guilty of something.
That's the point.
Yeah, and it's trivial for them to catch you up. You got to look into Lori Lightfoot from Chicago, Beetlejuice. There was a car dealership that got robbed, and they let her have it in the press. And there was like a screaming match. They went to see her, and they're like, "You have to do something about this crime." A week later, they got a bunch of lockdown violation fines.
That happens in New York a lot. Louis Rossman's always complaining about that. He's like, I got to move my shop out of New York City because every time I make a video making fun of the bureaucracy, I get more fines for things I'm not guilty of.
I've got no pity for anybody running a business in Chicago. Just leave. It's the only choice.
Salt the earth so nothing can ever grow again.
Exactly. I mean, it's so cold and miserable there. Why? Let's just nuke it.
we're gonna need that water soon around the Great Lakes.
I'm sure it's terribly polluted at this point. Right?
A lot of dead bodies from the mob activity in there too.
Mom said this about the Kentucky River. She's like, never swim there. It's full of
I wouldn't
bodies.
swim in any U.S. river, right? There's probably like 3 or 4 that are safe. Well, NFTs, I got to say, as I'm collating a lot of these stories, I don't put every NFT story in here. It is like an avalanche.
There's so many.
I was going to suggest this one goes into the nonsense section, but it's just on the other edge.
Yeah, well, NFTs it's a tidal wave. And I'm hoping that it's going to just like crest and never hit the shore, because it's such a stupid thing. But everybody needs to be a part of it. Now in China, there's a huge problem with NFTs. All the blockchains are banned. What can you do?
China to create own NFT industry based on state-backed blockchain infrastructure, main developer says. The quote from the party is literally, hey, we have no problem with NFT, you just have to use real currency, and you have to distance yourself from cryptocurrency. So NFT as a chain of custody functionality, fine, that's great, but just as long as it's not connected to a crypto monetary thing.
But you skipped the biggest one. It has to be a centralized blockchain, and the center of that chain has to be the Communist Party.
Yeah.
They're in charge of it all. So, yeah. But it still seems to be hot. The Chinese people still seem to want. Also, they localize existing blockchains. There's a Chinese Ethereum that's totally separate from the real Ethereum.
Just like the internet.
Why not call it something else? And in India, they're having some issues with their mobile carriers, and their mobile carriers are not having a very good time. They're going to make the same mistake that we made with our car companies.
India to own 38.5% of Vodafone Idea after conversion of dues. So Vodafone bought a bunch of spectrum there, and they owe payments on that and blah, blah, blah. And this is just sort of consolidating all of that because they were struggling financially a bit. So now the government is going to have an interest in Vodafone.
But the government is buying a dying company because the competitor gives you free call time and cheaper data for the same coverage. So the Indian government just bought a huge lemon with brown spots all over it.
But we can still turn it into lemonade. It's like, it's kind of a strange tasting lemonade. Hopefully it's got antibiotic properties.
Or antivirus properties. Although you have to be real careful about your antivirus these days, because as Mr. Krebs points out, it's all a giant web that's owned by the same company, and they're all pulling the same crap.
500 million Avira antivirus users introduced to cryptomining. So guess who owns Avira? Yeah, that's right. Symantec bought them. And guess what Symantec was derided for last week? rolling out cryptocurrency mining in the antivirus software. And that's not I mean, I would be okay with it if it was the antivirus company saying, if you're going to do this securely, here's how you do this. But the grift is the antivirus company is skimming a lot off the top.
Yeah. And they really aren't offering you anything. I mean, their miner is not better than another miner. You could run another miner on your system easily.
Yeah.
How long until it starts flagging other miners as risks?
I think it already started.
Probably already doing it, yeah.
That's NiceHash has already experienced that horror, and NiceHash is not great, but it's better than this by miles and miles.
Well, yeah, anyone that lets you keep all of it is better than that, right? And here's what we were talking about in terms of the supply chain of your package manager. And I got to say, I don't agree with this guy at all. Like at first you're like, oh, maybe he's making a statement. No, the statement is, I'm greedy.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to be greedy, but you're not allowed to be greedy after you've already given something away.
Dev corrupts NPM libraries Color and Faker, breaking thousands of apps. So where we are with JavaScript package management is this sort of hellish wasteland where everything depends on everything else, and a Hello World application requires 17 megabytes of JavaScript. That's just where we are. So these packages are used in a bunch of stuff, and he was running the stats. It's like, if I just got a penny for every time somebody used my library, I would be wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice. And he had a bit of a tantrum.
Well, you should have sold it for a penny. That's how that works. Also, he changed it to break it, but also to tantrum as it breaks. So it screams liberty as it spouts out nonsense, and all I could think about was prison architect. Literacy!
Literacy!
Literacy! That's what I would have done if I would have pulled this.
They get so angry if you don't put a bookshelf in their cell.
Makes sense. They don't have a lot to do.
I always try to make my prisons really, really nice in Prison Architect, but if you go to the Prison Architect subreddit, it's just misery. Like, people just try to find ways to stuff them into the tiniest cells possible.
But that's realistic.
It is realistic.
Because that's what they're literally trying to do.
I go with the Nordic model of prisons.
It's literally a research project by Corrections Corporation of America.
Krista, if you went with a Nordic prison and filled it up with street gangs, it'd be burning down in a week.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some riots before. In-game.
Well, Apple keeps making great new privacy features. Now, they're private from everybody but Apple. But still, that's better than not private from anybody, right? Comparatively. But the other companies really, really, really hate that. And they do everything they can to undermine it.
T-Mobile begins blocking iPhone users from enabling iCloud private relay in the U.S. Now, this is a 9to5 Mac article, but there have been more developments on this. Basically, if you turn on this feature, your traffic is supposed to be routed through Apple. Now, T-Mobile has come out and said, no, we're not explicitly blocking this. We're not really sure what about our network breaks this. And they did some investigation, and they ultimately blamed Apple. Of course, Apple turned around and said, no, this is a misconfiguration on T-Mobile's site because everybody knows that only Apple knows best. So it's a lot of weird finger pointing. But I wouldn't expect the VPN protocol to be so brittle as to not work if there's a slight network misconfiguration.
Yeah, and plus we know that T-Mobile reaps great monetary benefit from that data.
Yeah, there's an aspect of this that's also related to the encrypted DNS aspect of it. And T-Mobile would really like to have that analytics data of your DNS traffic, even if your web traffic is encrypted.
Yeah, it benefits them in every way to spy. And they're saying, no, we don't want to spy. It's just broken for other reasons, which makes it suspicious. Also suspicious is this report. Although this is one of those researchers did it, I don't know how easy it's going to be to reproduce in the real world. Yeah. But if it were, pretty terrifying.
Threat actors can simulate iPhone reboots and keep iOS malware on a device. So this is one of the scariest malware scenarios where the malware actually lives in RAM. It's pretty easy to scan a file system for corruption. If you have a really bad piece of malware, the malware can know when you're scanning the file system to lie to you about what's on the file system. But rebooting the device, that's one easy way for it to come back. If it lives in memory, and it only lives in memory, then theoretically restarting the device should clear your device of malware. So this is why it's important for malware to live in memory.
Turns the screen off and turns off all of the inputs. So for all, I guess if you measured the temperature, you might be able to notice a slight higher temperature, but it's just the time that it's rebooting, so maybe not even that. So it's real tough to tell if this is happening to you or not.
It's like the Pegasus malware. It's like Apple has the ability to tell you that there's malware on your phone, but they lock your ability to do that kind of audit yourself. So it ends up being pretty ineffective.
You just get it wrong.
Can't I even read-only audit this? No, that'll open up more vectors for bad guys. And it's like, kind of darned if we do, darned if we don't there, huh, Apple?
One space where technology, for the most part, makes our lives better. But surveillance technology often makes our lives worse. And one way that surveillance technology has really thrived is in parking, traffic, red light cameras, speed cameras, automated fleecing of the populace.
Citizen 2, you were in Zone 3 for 15 minutes longer than your allotted time. You will be billed $5.
And there was a murder in that zone, so you need to report. But some of these do make our lives a little bit easier, because instead of having to have a handful of change or whatever, or dealing with validating a ticket, it's all just digital. But that increases the risk as well.
Scammers put fake QR codes on parking meters to intercept parkers' payments. Fraudulent QR codes on parking meters found in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio.
It's kind of brilliant. I mean, it's terrible. But what a simple scam.
But the crazy thing about these parking meters, they don't use QR codes.
People just scan them anyway. Like,
I guess so, yeah. And I'm pretty sure that little screen doesn't change. So I don't know if they thought they were paid for parking or what, but yeah, don't do that. Be careful of that. What a short episode.
It is.
Is this the shortest episode ever?
This is the shortest episode in a long time.
Well, what number are we at?
Last.
No, I mean what
Episode number?
timestamp?
Oh, I don't know. You'd
Like,
have to.
how long have we been recording?
You want to know 21 minutes.
Oh, wow, it is pretty short.
Yeah, really short. But this is a very cool thing. Now, you cannot, I don't know, I guess you can buy one of these RF scanners.
Yes.
I don't know how expensive they are. I imagine
Picoscope 6407.
I imagine those will, if a Chinese company is not already cranking those out at a massive pace, they will be by the time you hear this.
Supply chain's kind of broken right now. It's more of a sputter.
But this is a very cool
They'll
thing.
just sit in the port.
Well, you know what? That shipping container will be completely free of malware. That'll be a beautiful thing.
Raspberry Pi can detect malware by scanning for electromagnetic waves. A simple wave scanning system built Raspberry Pi predicted malware with accuracy up to 99.8%. It's very impressive.
That's amazing. I feel like there's a mistake there.
Well, I mean, it does change the electromagnetic pattern of the computer, but it seems like doing pretty much anything else would also change the electromagnetic pattern of the computer.
Yeah, and wouldn't you have to measure it against that same hardware combination not doing malware?
Yeah.
I mean, how? Because if it's a brand new computer,
Yeah.
how would you have the baseline?
I think if they trained it, like, say, on a particular laptop, and then they were trying to use a different laptop to know, I don't think it's going to be as effective.
What if you train it on a laptop, and then let's say the SSD dies in that laptop, and you just swap it out? Is that going to be the same signature?
It'll be close, unless you swap it out with a completely different SSD.
But as close as the same thing running malware? There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I've been playing with the TensorFlow module, one of the Google ones that's on an M.2, and you look at it and it looks like nothing because it's just a tiny, tiny little chip and a couple capacitors. And I've been doing object recognition with it, so I've been feeding it, lots of high-resolution images. And if you do that AI processing with a CPU, like, it's giving these high-end server CPUs a run for its money. But this tiny little chip with only like 20 or 30 pins on it can process that image and find people and cars and cats and dogs and do image recognition in that image. And it's like not even 1 watt. It's like this crazy black magic.
Well, it's the same when Bitcoin went to ASICs.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, what?
Yeah, it's like, how is this even possible? This is just, I don't understand. Why are CPUs so crappy? I don't understand.
Turns out when you can do literally anything, you
Yeah.
lose some efficiency.
Yeah.
It's like being able to cook every recipe in the universe.
It's the real world manifestation of those people that build the computers in Minecraft, where you look at it, it's just, this seems overly complicated, and it's like, yeah, we had to build that in real life.
Except in real life, it has value. Chris, what was the craziest thing we had on the Minecraft server in terms of like just useless extravagance?
There was a lot of, I mean, this happens every year where they do like the farming machines. There weren't quite as many this year because we were trying to keep the performance up. But there's always like chicken mining. There's also like cow mining. They also will corral the villagers and make them into like little slave farms, which is kind of weird because you can get enchantments and stuff from the villagers.
I'm surprised that Microsoft hasn't caught any flack for that.
They have a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a story about it a few years ago when they introduced the mechanic where you could like trade with the villagers, and people started, trading the villagers because they wanted the stuff that they gave you. And Microsoft was like, we didn't really mean for that to happen, but I mean, it is just kind of how the game works, I guess, if you're trying to get materials.
That's kind of exactly how it played out when we started landing on other continents, isn't it?
Yeah, art imitates life, I guess.
Oh, we had a follow-up, too, for our Dead by Daylight story from last week. And you remember how, we mentioned that when Leatherface was wearing the face of the other players, that there seemed to be a racial component to that because of the statistically more people would use that. There was a pro, like an internationally known Dead by Daylight player that commented on that and said the reason for that is because the darker skin version lets you blend in better. It's a camouflage thing.
Oh.
Does that really play into it? I remember playing that game, and there was never a time when the villain was hidden. The villains were big and scary, and like they didn't know where you were. You knew where they were.
I don't know if they were trolling or not. That's just what they said.
I don't know. There are sometimes little things like that in games. Like Overwatch, even people who are like top streamers will play on low settings because they want to get rid of all the foliage and stuff in the map, and they want to be able to see if someone's hiding.
That's definitely a pro strat for Icarus. It's like you can see all the wolves and bears and stuff from far away.
Yeah, somebody turns up their gamma to cheat.
Oh, yes, you can go into the caves without having to worry.
All right.
27 minutes. Well, it might not be the shortest, but it's definitely short.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, people. It's January. All the journalists are, I don't know, just
everyone's
day
talking
drinking.
about the weather.
Chris, the weather doesn't affect anybody but us.
The weather's so exciting.
January is almost gone, too, by the way.
So we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.